Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I hope my screen is visible. Check your audio and video settings. Let me know if my screen is also visible. My screen is visible. Hello. My screen is visible. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Okay, yesterday we have just discussed about, we have just started about Java language fundamentals. So we have taken the real-time analogy, a simple house construction. Even though if the house construction is simple or complicated, the common raw materials are sand, water, cement, bricks, iron, etc. So the common things, even a small house, for even for the small house construction or for a big building construction, these raw materials are essential, right? Likewise, in Java, there are some fundamental items that is required to develop a Java application. This is one of the best real-time analogy that you can compare, right? So Java has provided some concepts to developers or programmers by default to prepare any Java application. Right? To prepare any kind of Java application, let it be a small application or a big complicated application, right? These things are necessary. These are just like what? Raw materials. Tokens, data types, typecasting, Java statements, and arrays. These act like a raw materials, right? And we have just started discussing about tokens. This is a small piece of Java code snippet, small piece, a typical Java code. And if you run this Java code, if you perform compilation, each and every element, each and every word will be represented as a lexeme. Right? The compiler is going to break each and every line, and in each and every line, the compiler will break the line into separate words. It will separate the words, and each and every word will be represented by the compiler in the form of tokens. Right? So this is what I've explained yesterday. This token is also called as the smallest element in the Java, which is also known as lexeme. You have to get used to this terminology, lexemes. Right? Every word, every symbol, whatever that you come across in the Java language is called as a lexeme. Right? You can calculate how many lexemes are after this class. So every word and every symbol, right? Every operators, every character, everything will be called as a what? Lexeme. Right? And again, I have also shown some examples like, for example, uh, all these three words are called as lexemes, right? Int, break, and for, they are called as lexemes. When they are going to fall under one typical category. So all these three things are going to fall under one category, which are called as keywords, right? This is called as a token. And again, the second example is each and every operator. We talk about these particular symbols, they are representing an operator, right? Each and every symbol, again, it is going to be treated as a lexeme. These lexemes can be collectively placed under one category. The name of the category is what? Operators, right? So they are called as token. Like this, the tokens are classified into 6 types. What are they? So tokens are again categorized into 6 types: keywords, identifiers, literals, operators, separators, and comments. We'll understand each and everything. We are just getting into the actual Java concepts, the foundation level of core Java concept. If after completing all these things individually, after learning about these things, we can develop a simple. We will be able to develop even the complicated Java programs. Right? Making sense? Right? Let's continue. 1 minute. 1 minute. Okay, let us understand each and every category under the tokens. Firstly, we will discuss about identifiers. Then we will discuss about keywords. Right, so that will make more sense. Let me help you with the identifiers. Identifiers in Java. A simple definition I can draft for the identifiers. A simple definition could look like this. You can say that assigning names to the Java elements is called as identifier. A simple one-line definition. Assigning names to the Java elements. Elements such as class, method, interface, variable, and so on and so on, called as identifier. Right? What does this statement really means? For example, let us take the real-time analogy here. I am a faculty and you are my students. I am a faculty and you are my students, right? Collectively, I can represent you all as students. But if I want to identify specifically, if I want to identify, so understand that this is me, faculty, and you are my. So collectively, I can call you as what? Students. Collectively, if I want to call you collectively, I can call you as what? Students. You are my students, right? Student 1, student 2, student 3. 3 students. Collectively, I can represent you in the word students. Right? But if I want to identify you separately, if I want to identify you specifically, you have the common identification. I can identify you with your names, because with the identification I can track your joining date, right? I can with your identification I can send the notes, I can send the information regarding to our classes, right? So I can I have Manish, and I have first one, I have Darshan, right? Unique identification is there, right? And again, if you go to college, it's me. And again, if you go to college, since you are the students, every day the attendance things will go on, right? You will be identified with your names. Collectively, you are called as, I mean, the whole class is going to have a lot of students. Each and every students will be identified by the names, right? Sometimes there will be clashes. Clashes in the sense, 3 persons can be assigned to single name. 3 persons can be assigned to single name. For example, to take my name Balaji, you can see a lot of persons with the name Balaji, right? So how the unique identification can be achieved? For example, let us say that you are coming across 3 persons with the same name Balaji, right? You want to identify the person specifically, you will try to catch their surname. Let us say that the surname is M, and the surname is S, and again there is surname M. Again there is a clash, because two persons are holding the same name, as well as they are assigned with the same surnames. What could be the third way of giving the unique identification? They used to give what? They used to generate registration numbers, right? With the registration number, these persons can be identified specifically. Making sense, right? The registration number, that's why we have registration numbers in the colleges. Likewise, in our country, if each and every candidate needs to be identified specifically, we have Aadhaar card number, right? From this, you can can't you? I mean, aren't you able to find the conclusion that each and every element, I mean, each and every person is identified uniquely? Means duplication is not there, right? You cannot duplicate the person. How can you avoid duplication? By assigning them with the unique identification names. Can you achieve unique identification? You can achieve unique identification with the names, right? If you face any problem with the names, you can achieve unique identification with the registration numbers. College example. Likewise, in India, each and every citizen can be identified uniquely by what? By their Aadhaar card numbers. Unique identification. It cannot have any duplicates, right? Likewise, if you want to define any class, you want to define any kind of methods, you want to define any variable, you need to assign a specific name, specific identification to the class, to the method, to the variable. Let us understand this little bit deeply, and you will get to know why is this really important to have any, to declare any class with the unique identification names. That conclusion I'm going to give you, right? Let's talk little bit about identifiers. Let me take a typical class. Forget about what is, now I think you have got some idea about what is a class. Inside a class, right? This class is a part of Java representation, part of Java code. Inside this class, you can have data. You can have data in order to perform any manipulation, any kind of operation. You can perform modification or any manipulation with the help of methods, data and methods. Right? Class. This is a class. Inside the class, you have data and methods. Right? This class is a common entity, common element. You cannot, this is incorrect, because you need to give a proper identification to this class, because there can be any number of classes in a Java file. There can be n number of classes in a Java file. This class 1, this is class 2, and right? In order to achieve the proper identification, I need to assign a name to this class. Each and every class needs a name that is called as identifier. Right? For example, let us say that this is a class. I am giving the name of the class as Ganesh. You can give any name, but the name should be very meaningful. Right? Just one. 3 names are there. Right? You can give any name. For example, if you are developing a calculator application, right? It would be meaningful to give the name of the application, name of the class as calculator. We make a lot of sense, isn't it? With any meaningful you can give, but there are some rules and guidelines that you have to follow when you are assigning a name to a particular Java element. Right? You need to follow what? You need to follow some set of rules and regulations. Let me write that here. Let me tell you one thing. Rules are like compulsion. Guidelines are like it is not a compulsion, it is a recommendation. Let me first write that here. Rules in Java. Rules in Java are like the compulsion, which means it needs to be followed. It must be followed, I can say. In the real-time example, if you are a school student, what are the rules and regulations when you walk into the school? Uniform is common, right? And every time you have to wear shoes. Very common thing, right? That is compulsion. And if you talk about guidelines in Java, guidelines. See, these things are very important, because you need to identify the elements by following these rules and guidelines. So guidelines in Java are like recommendation, which means it is not necessary to follow, but it is recommended to follow. Example, if you are visiting masjid, church, or temple, right? If you visit temple, it is recommended to wear the traditional outfits, right? But it is not compulsory, right? So that same example, the same similar example, you can. There are some cases where it is not compulsion, but it is recommended. We will see this tool for the identifiers. Making sense? Just type S in the chat box if you are able to follow me till now. I want to ensure that you are with me. That's why. Darshini, Saswant, are you able to follow? Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us understand. So rules and guidelines. Now we will understand rules and guidelines on top of Java identifiers. Identifiers. So the first rule, the first thumb rule is Java identifiers. You should not assign an identifier. Okay, why these rules and guidelines should be followed? First, we will understand why these rules and guidelines need to be followed. For example, in the real time, if you take a real time example, so there will be a name keeping ceremony for the baby, right? For a new baby, after 1 or 2 months, the parents of the baby, what they do approach an astrologer, right? They approach the astrologer, and astrologer will take some data will be in the form of like taking the birth date, the birth time. He will consider all these things. He will do some calculations. He will perform a lot of calculations, and he will come to a conclusion saying that okay, this baby should be assigned with a name that starts with a specific letter, right? It is called as a Vastu calculation. In Christianity, we call it as baptism. In Hinduism, we call it as what? Namakarna, right? Likewise, in Java also, Java accepts some rules and guidelines. When you are trying to uh, assign a particular name to Java elements, you follow these rules and guidelines. Making sense, right? So how are they? What is the first rule? All Java identifiers must not start with numbers, special characters, except underscore and dollar symbol. This is dollar symbol. So rule number one says you can assign any identifier to the Java elements, no problem. But the first letter should not start with numbers and special characters. These are the exceptional cases. We can use this in the beginning of the identifier. You can use this, but you are not supposed to use numbers. You are not supposed to use special characters, right? And from this, we can conclude one more thing. What is the second thing? All the Java identifiers may start with what? Letters, alphabets, and the special characters, underscore and dollar symbol, and the subsequent characters can start with numbers and special symbols. Right? So the conclusion is like you can use any name, but please ensure that the name must not start with numbers and special characters, right? And the name may start with alphabets, and you can consider these two special characters, and the subsequent characters can start with numbers and special symbols. Let us see some examples for the better understanding. Right? For example, if I am taking a class, class name can be like this: student underscore details. This is valid. This is valid, but this is not valid. This is not valid. This is valid because you can start with the dollar symbol. And this is also valid. You can start with underscore symbol. Now tell me this is valid or not valid. Tell me, just type H in the chat. Type in the chat box if it is valid or if it is not valid. Very simple. Just look at this. Only the limitations are for starting. When you want to give an identifier name, the first letter, the first character should not start with a number or special characters. These are acceptable, and the subsequent characters can have numbers and the special symbols. Right? Consider this. This is a valid or not valid? Tell me, no. Very simple question. If it is valid, type valid in the chat box. If not, type invalid in the chat box. Yes, completely valid. Yes, correct. Right. One more question. Class underscore student at the rate. Now tell me this is valid or not valid. Not valid. Correct. Not valid because it is not. We should ensure that it is not getting started with the special characters. Right. The limitations are for, right, when you start writing an identifier, please make sure that the first character of the identifier is not getting started with a number or special characters. But these two are exceptional cases, right? So let me write that here. This part is valid, and this is what invalid, and this is what valid. No, this is also valid. Okay. Valid, invalid. This is one case, and this is for assigning the identifiers to the class element. Likewise, we have methods, isn't it? We have variables, we have interfaces. For all these elements, the same rules are applied. Right? Consider this first rule. This is the first thumb rule, and there is a second rule. Second rule, what it says? See, the Java people are very clear because if you consider any name of a student, for example, take Ganesh here. take Ganesh as an example. So Ganesh is the first name and Ganesh is a surname, right? Okay. So there is a space because the real-time person or real-time this is one of the real-time identifiers. Name of the Ganesh. First name, the last name. I mean, there is a space between these two names, isn't it? But in Java, you cannot identify any element with two names, right? You can identify element with two names, but you should not use any spaces. For example, let us take no, let us take Ajit Kumar. It is valid. The actor Ajit Kumar is valid in the real time. But if I want to represent Ajit Kumar as a Java identifier, I should represent like this. I'm not supposed to use any spaces. Then how do I know that this two words? I mean, these two names are different. I mean, these two words are different part of different names. So the second name will be starting with the capital letter. So the convention is in the Java programming language. Making sense? Java accepts this. Java is going to accept this name. Accept it. Java is not going to accept what? Should not keep any spaces. For identifiers. So don't get confused. For the identifiers, you're not supposed to keep any spaces. Space should be what? Space should be eliminated or restricted. So this is valid. Right? This is invalid. Invalid. Right? So the conclusion is very simple, right? The second thumb rule is very, very simple. There should not be any space in an identifier. So this is the example. Let me copy and paste this example. Okay. This is the second rule. This is what second rule. Rule number 2. Making sense? Right? Third rule. So these are rules. These two are the rules, and the third one is I will introduce one guideline. The guideline is like an identifier should not be, not must. This is not a must case. This is a should case. Identifier should not be the identifier should not be in a length. I can say that identifier should be in a length between, at least you should use 4 letters. Maximum you can go up to 15 letters. At least this is a guideline. This is not a compulsion. This is a recommendation. Even though if you are following it, not following it, no issues, because this is not a rule. This is just a guideline. It is highly recommended to assign an identifier, right, with letters that can exceed more than 4, and it should be less than 15 letters. Right? So I can write, however, there is no minimum limit and no maximum limit on top of its length. But it is a good programming practice, that's it. Likewise, if you are trying to visit any religious places, see, it will be good if you are visiting the religious places with traditional outfits, right? It's just a recommendation, not a compulsion, right? Likewise, in Java, this identifier should not exceed more than 15 letters. At the same time, it is not supposed to be less than 4 letters or 4 characters, right? So this is just a recommendation. You can say that it is highly recommended to follow this as a good programming practice. Programming, right? And the fourth one is we cannot use. So this is a recommendation. Now this is a compulsion. We cannot use, or you can say we must not use reserved words as Java identifier. Reserved words are the list of words that is listed under the keywords, Java keywords. They are the predefined words that are defined by the Java people. Some words are there. There are about 51 reserved words. You cannot use those words as an identifiers, right? They are reserved only for the Java language. Some examples are like main method is there. You cannot use the main method as Java identifier. It's going to be like it is going to create an ambiguity. It is going to create a lot of confusion, right? Examples are like so this int, this float, these are the data types. We can also call it as keywords, but you are not supposed to use these words as an identifier because these words are already reserved by Java. Java says you use whatever you want. By following these rules or regulations, you use whatever the name that you want, but don't touch these names, right? In float class, there are 51 such names. We are not supposed to use. Making sense, right? So this is one of the limitations. We are not supposed to use these keywords or the reserved words as our identification as the identifiers, right? And the fifth, this is the rule. This is the guideline, and this is the rule. Compulsory. This is a recommendation, right? And this one is what? Compulsion. This one is also compulsion. 1, 2, 4 are compulsion, and 3, 1 is just a recommendation. So let me put this in a box. Right? And the last one is very simple. Fifth rule. Identifier should not be any query language keywords. What is a query language keyword? So we have some databases like Oracle, SQL, MySQL, PostGRE. So many databases, so many query languages are there. They are part of databases. Usually they use queries like the select query is there, from query is there, some constants are there, count. So things like this. So we are not supposed to use these words as Java identifiers. It will create a confusion. Okay. So this is not part of Java language, but this is part of the computer system. I mean, in the computer world, we have many softwares, many languages, right? So this is part of some other language, like structured query language. The structured query language, they use constraints like select, from, count. So you are not supposed to, we are not recommended to use this type of constraints as an identifier, because in future we develop some programs that is going to, the Java language is going to get communicated with the database language, right? If in such cases it creates some confusion in identifying the exact identifiers, exact elements, I can say. Right? There are 5 such rules in order to define an identifier. Right? So I can conclude that this identifier concept is over. And next we will have to talk about keywords. So before talking about keywords, let's understand this. Let's run this. I need to show the proof, right? Whether these identifiers are, if the compiler is really not accepting if it is really accepting these rules and regulations. Let us Let us track that by creating a Java program. Let me open my notepad. The class simply I am writing, I am identifying this class. I am assigning a name allowed to this class. Just a name identifier, simple identifier, right? This is a completely valid identifier. How we can say this is a complete valid identifier? If we are compiling this program, we are not supposed to get any errors. Okay, let me save this. Let me open command prompt. Darshini and Ashwant, Saturday or Sunday will take some backup classes, so you will understand what is this command prompt and how to write a program in the file, how to perform the execution. We will take backup classes on Sunday. If you tell me about the timings, about your convenient timing, I'm okay to take some backup classes for you to go. Okay. So let me perform compilation. Compilation is nothing but compiler will check if you are following the right guidelines. The Java program. It will check for any errors. Okay, let me perform the compilation. For compilation, we have Java C space hello.java file name dot java. It is not giving any errors. It means this is valid. So let me use underscore. This is an identifier. So in the identifier, in the middle of this identifier, I have used an underscore symbol. This is also valid, isn't it? But I need to save this file as file name should be the same as the class name. Okay. Valid. No errors. Let me let me add 3 in the beginning. See, look at this. It is not accepting this as an identifier. This is what the error that we got. I am assigning a name. I am assigning an identifier to this class, but this identifier is not following the rules. What is the mistake that we have done? So I have already said that in the beginning of an identifier, we are not supposed to use any numbers. I have just used a number. Okay. After using this number, I tried to perform the compilation. Compiler has identified the error. Compiler says invalid flag. Right? It is unable to compile this particular code because this is not a valid one. You're not supposed to use a number in the beginning of an identifier. Right? It is giving us an error saying that invalid flag. It's nothing but an invalid identifier. That's it. It's an internal command. So literally, it is saying that it is an invalid identifier. You're not supposed to use a number. This is one of the examples that I can that we can use to understand real-time example. Valid identifier. Explanation. The compiler will always check if the given identifier is declared by using the standard rules and regulations. Standard rules are, if there is any violation, it is going to throw the below error. It's going to throw the below error. There is a violation, right? It will check each and every rule. Rule number 1 is violated. Because of the violation of rule number 1, we are getting this error. Right? Rule number 1 violation, that's why. I can say that the rule number 1 is violated. Making sense? Right? So this violation is on top of the classes. Likewise, the violation can happen on top of methods, on top of variables. Right? So let me list out some variables. Teacher, teacher. So this is just like a data type. The identifier can be declared after the data type. For example, in my program, I may be having a lot of data. I may be working with numerical data, right? I may be working with character data. I mean string data. String data can be like any name representation. I may be working with a floating point data, any number with floating values, right? And I can also be working with a character data. Any single character is called as a character. This kinds of data, if any programmer or any developer will encounter this many types of data, right? But each and every data has to be assigned with a valid identifier, right? This is of number. This is representing a number. So in Java, the numbers are represented with the integer data type, and this is a kind of word. In Java, we usually call a sequence of letters as strings. In English dictionary, it is called as a name and we can call it as a word. But in Java, we call it as a what, string. Okay? And we call it as a floating point value. We call it as what, character, which is also called as character. These are the data types. These are the values. But I need to place an identifier, right? Data type, value. In between the data type and the data type and the value, I need to place the valid identifier. Identifier can be like, this can be like number. This can be like name. This can be like what, number underscore decimal floating point. This can be like initial, right? So in this case, this is an identifier. This is representing an identifier, right? This is representing an identifier. We will see about these data types in the future classes, but I am just talking about the identifier. This is the identifier and this is one identifier. All these identifiers are valid, right? And these identifiers, we have to ensure that whenever we are declaring a valid identifier for the variables, this identifier should also follow these 5 rules. Rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3, rule number 4, and rule number 5. Of course, rule number 3 is not a rule, it is a guideline, it is a recommendation, not a compulsion. 1, 2, 4, and 5 are compulsion. Okay? Now you tell me, I will list out some identifiers. You tell me whether it is a valid or invalid. I'm saying int student marks equal to 100. So tell me which one are valid, which one are invalid. First one is valid or invalid. Take your time. Second one. Third one. Okay. Okay, okay. Wait. Good, good, good. Second one, I'm asking about second one. Second one. I want answer from you. Second one. This one is valid or invalid? Exactly. Second one is invalid. Good. Second one is invalid, and which another one is also invalid. Which is that? Can you identify? There are two invalid identifiers. Second one is okay, correct. It is invalid, and another fourth one. No. Fourth one is valid. Why it is valid? See, it is starting with underscore. Underscore is possible. The sequence in between two letters, we can have numbers. Fifth one is invalid. We are not supposed to keep any spaces. You remember? Fifth one. Yes, correct. So valid, invalid. Third one is valid. Fourth one is valid. Fifth one is what? Invalid. Simple. In future, you will design some Java applications. You will ensure that you are using the proper identifiers. Invalid. Because this one is violating rule number one. This one is violating uh, rule number two. Rule number one violation. Rule number two violation. You can say that compiler is not going to accept this. One more question. Now tell me if this identifier is valid or not. It is valid or invalid. This identifier is valid or invalid. Let me paste it in the chat box. Please check and tell valid or invalid. This is my first Java program. Check all the rules. First check the rules, then think about the guidelines. So, okay, let me put you this way. Which rule this is violating? More than 15. Okay, it is valid, but it is not recommended. It is valid. Compiler will not throw any error, but it is not recommended. From compiler point of view, compiler is okay. Okay, yeah, correct. Compiler is okay with this, but compile, I mean, it is not recommended. It talks about guidelines, right? So no one is going to use identifier with this many words, right? It is just like a paragraph, mini paragraph. Right? I can say that this is valid, but definitely not recommended. So the takeaway is compiler will not stop you assign, I mean, declaring an identifier with this many words, this many sequence of words. It will check only for rule number 1, 2, 4, 5 violations. This is a rule number, this is a guideline number 3 violation, not a rule. But 3 violation, compiler will not come into picture. See, in the real-time example, there might be some persons with very big names, right? So government is going to stop them or what? Here we have freedom, we have liberty to assign a name to a baby, which is having a sequence of a big sequence of characters or big sequence of words. Likewise, it is okay, but it is not recommended. That's it, right? Making sense? So this is all about the Java identifiers. Tomorrow we will start discussing about the Java keywords, right? There are 51 Java keywords, and if we complete all the 51 keywords, the whole Java will be completed. Not whole Java, 70% of Java will be completed. And then we will talk about literals, operators, separators, and comma. These fundamental things are very important. Do not skip the class. Understanding these fundamentals are like just starting to understand the Java program. Right? Any questions you have?